Hello everyone, good morning from Caracas. Thanks for joining us on From the South. I'm Cody Wetta. We begin here in Venezuela this morning. That's where the government says that the U.S. is again progressively meddling in the country's internal affairs. Now it comes after the U.S. ambassador to neighboring Guyana, Perry Holloway, said Venezuela should end its claim to a piece of land also claimed by Guyana. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro expressed his anger and demanded that Washington not become involved in the country's border dispute. He told the U.S. government he would no longer accept their intervention. Now, Maduro also accused the United States of attempting to damage the good ties between Guyana and Venezuela.
La declaración del embajador.
The statement by U.S. Ambassador in Guyana, Perry Holloway, is an acknowledgement that the U.S. government, its political, economic, and military powers are behind the Guyanese president, David Granger. ExxonMobil is also taking part in an operation against Venezuela aimed at generating a major conflict to the Essequibo region.
And Maduro also took the opportunity to condemn U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's statement regarding Venezuela's democratic electoral system. Now, he told Kerry that only Venezuelans can say whether the country's democracy is imperfect or not. Maduro says that Venezuela currently enjoys the best democracy in its history. Now, in the last 15 years, Venezuela has celebrated over 19 elections widely considered free and fair. In Colombia now, the Attorney General there has asked the Supreme Court to open a criminal investigation against former President and current Senator Álvaro Uribe. The prosecutor's office is accusing him of complicity in a paramilitary massacre in 1997. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita now with that story.
Prior to becoming president, Álvaro Uribe was the governor of the state of Antioquia between 1995 and 1997, a period in which the back-then local mayor, Gloria Cuartas, recalls the horror of 116 massacres that left nearly 700 dead and some 200,000 displaced.
Álvaro Uribe is responsible for the paramilitary structures. He holds responsibility in that regard. It is not possible that after all the murders, bombardments, extrajudicial killings and massacres that took place in Antioquia, the back-then governor says he had nothing to do with it.
Among those massacres is the one of 1997, when paramilitaries entered the village of El Aro, murdering 15 and burning the town to the ground. The Inter-American Court of Human Rights has already convicted the Colombian state. Now the country's prosecution has ordered an investigation into Álvaro Uribe's alleged complicity in the massacre.
The investigation against Álvaro Uribe for what happened while he was the governor of the state of Antioquia seems to come a little bit late. There were already more than enough testimonies, complaints and facts that were seriously incriminating the former governor and then President Álvaro Uribe.
Among the key evidence is the statement of Don Berna, a former paramilitary commander extradited to the United States and who has accused Uribe of having direct knowledge of the 1997 massacre and of sympathizing with paramilitarism.
Many of what happened back during those days is rooted in Uribe's security policies. Now the already proven links between many of his close aides and members of government with paramilitaries implicates Uribe's responsibility too.
For many, the investigation into Uribe's links with paramilitarism is part of the truth and responsibilities that will have to be acknowledged during an eventual process of transitional justice. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
The United States Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker is in Cuba for 2 days of talks regarding economic and trade ties with a focus on the U.S. blockade. Now, the U.S. official visited the Bay of Mariel, a port that has been built to encourage further foreign investment in the island nation. The port is also situated to handle U.S. cargo, and when the blockade is lifted, U.S. food exports are already being received through the bay. And while the U.S. government makes strides to weaken the 54-year-old measure, Cuba insists relations with Washington will not be normalized until the blockade is completely lifted, among some other demands. Peru is hosting the 2015 annual meetings of the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund, making them the first Latin American country to do so since 1967. The meetings will take place between October 9th and 11th. The conference includes finance ministers, bankers, private business people, and academics. They will assess global economic and financial issues. Now, ahead of the meeting, the IMF and World Bank have revealed their predictions on the Latin American economy.
What is true is that the risk of Latin America going into a great financial crisis like in the 90s remains low. But that is not to say that this process of slowdown is not a painful adjustment. It has been painful.
And many Peruvians are not happy with the IMF and the World Bank visiting their country because they are linked to a mining disaster there. Hundreds of protesters gathered, yelling phrases like "Yankees, fascists, get out of Peru." The rally was just a sample of the huge protest they are planning for October 9th against both institutions. The IMF and World Bank had shares in the Conga mining project when a toxic spill caused severe health problems and environmental damage in the area. And now we're going to take a look at some of the other stories making the news around the world.
The U.S. has finally taken responsibility for the deadly airstrike in a hospital run by Doctors Without Borders in the Afghan city of Kunduz. This comes after the Pentagon denied it had attacked the hospital, then said the airstrike had in fact taken place, but the Afghan government had requested the bombing. U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter said it was all a mistake. U.S. warplanes attacked the hospital for about an hour, killing 22 and injuring close to 40. The medical shari said the incident amounts to a war crime.
Well, for this investigation is so important because this is an attack on humanitarian action. It's not an attack only on the hospital of Kunduz and on MSF. This attack is much larger because this hospital, once again, was doing what a humanitarian action does, treating the wounded of a warfare and very close to the front line.
Russia's defense ministry said its fighter jets carried out around 20 combat missions in Syria. 12 Islamic State group sites were targeted. Although the extent of damage of victims was not revealed, in less than a week, Russian warplanes have destroyed 2 Islamic State group command centers and other relevant sites. Moscow said that after their attacks began, over 3,000 Islamic State militants abandoned their arms and fled Syria. Our aviation in Syria is not applied on residential settlements or architectural monuments. All international media outlets showed the destruction of the unique monuments of antiquity in Palmyra by the militants. With this background, it is at least unprofessional and also beyond the border of journalist ethics to blame Russian aviation in the bombardment of Palmyra. An international human rights organization blamed the United States for the death of thousands of innocent civilians in Yemen. Amnesty International said that the Saudi-led airstrikes are being carried out with U.S. weapons and ammunition. The group said the United States should immediately stop selling weapons to its ally Saudi Arabia and the rest of the coalition. They also accused Washington of being complicit in the war crimes against civilians in Yemen, especially if they continue to supply arms.
I think the silence of the international community, including the U.S., is quite frightening. I mean, the chances are probably quite low, but we have to ask and we have to push, because what we've seen and we've documented are alleged war crimes, and we're saying that they are war crimes that need to be investigated by an international commission of inquiry.
As the flow of refugees continue to grow, especially into Europe, Australia faces criticism due to the way they treat asylum seekers. The country's highest court is looking into whether the policy of sending asylum seekers to the tiny South Pacific nation of Nauru for long-term detention is in breach of the Constitution. At that detention centers, serious human rights abuses have been continuously reported, including against children. Successive Australian governments have vowed to stop asylum seekers reaching the mainland.
For a lighter side of the news now, we're back here in Venezuela, where for the past 2 years, Venezuelan architect Joel Valencia has been bringing open-air yoga sessions to a neighborhood here in Caracas. Since 2013, the program has given yoga classes to more than 3,500 people. who have praised the project, which began with 5 instructors and now has expanded to over 80. Locals benefiting from the program say they were fortunate to receive yoga classes that have notably improved their lives. That's what we're covering on this Wednesday morning here from Caracas. Plenty more on all of those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.